I was looking for a new network. I was looking for an environment where I could learn more about my history, my roots, my culture. I was looking for a place where I could explore the nuances and the discomfort of this moment in time. And I think I've gotten all of those pretty much from this fellowship. And my hope is that after it's done, we'll all stay, connected and kind of be along on everyone's journeys. Hi, my name is Mackey. I'm in Queens, New York City. I'm in the Avodah Justice Fellowship this year. My background is in both, I would say, politics as well as filmmaking. Currently, I'm working on a congressional campaign as the video producer. So the Justice Fellowship is I think it's about an 8-month program. It's in person. Every couple weeks we meet, sometimes a little bit more frequently. So the idea, as I see it, is to bring a bunch of, I would say, young professionals. I think it's our age range is mid 20s to late 30s, something in that range. People who are working in something related to social justice. It could be nonprofit, it could be artists, it could be corporate, whatever. It could just be people who are interested in more social justice oriented work, who are also Jewish or who are exploring their Judaism or their relationship to Judaism. We take this time and in these sessions to explore various aspects of Jewish history, Jewish culture through the lens of social justice. I think it's a space for us to explore these really heavy, big topics that are maybe floating around in the air. There's a lot of feelings and emotions and opinions about all of these things that are going on in the world right now. And it's a space where we can talk about these things with less judgment, a more kind of a structured environment to explore how we're all feeling about these things coming from our various backgrounds. So I was raised in a household that we weren't religious, but we did observe the high holidays. We went to synagogue. I went to Hebrew school and got a bar mitzvah. We practiced Judaism in a way, but it wasn't like a giant part of my upbringing, I would say. I think it was just a thing we did as a family. After my bar mitzvah, I chose to not continue going to Hebrew school. So I think as I got a bit older and in college and after college in my 20s, I just didn't feel that connected to my Jewish roots. Wasn't really seeking out other Jewish spaces. And then as I got a little bit older, in my early 30s, I started being a little bit more interested in that. I started being a little bit more interested in my roots, my family history. So this was kind of a step in the direction of let me actually take some time out of my life to explore these things and to learn a little bit more about these cultures and this history. I was actually working at Columbia University for a few years, and I was there during October 7th. So I saw the student protests. Columbia University was, of course, one of the big hubs of the student protests right after October 7th. And I think it was pretty much a year after. It was that winter and spring and summer, I believe, where it was really, pretty intense and very in the news. I was seeing both the news reports and I was hearing from family who are very worried about my safety as a Jewish person walking around campus. And also I was seeing what was happening on the ground, which was most days, it was pretty chill. It was pretty peaceful. It was a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-olds being 18, 19, 20-year-olds, just kind of, trying to figure out what a more peaceful, protest-oriented campus environment could look like for them, while they had the very hot spotlight of the media and the moment shining on them. And it was a very weird, chaotic time of, the reality not mixing with what people thought it was. So it was a really strange time, I think, just for the Jewish diaspora in general, but especially for myself being in that very specific environment. I just didn't feel I had a space to talk about these things with other people who are interested in this stuff. I mean, I have a good amount of friends who are Jewish, but like myself, we were all kind of raised, not religious, not particularly attached to the Jewish community. We just, I like to say that I grew up I was Jewish, but I wasn't really being Jewish. I wasn't really acting Jewish. Going through the October 7th period, I think that really made me feel like I need to explore some of these ideas a little bit more. I need to understand the politics of this moment. I need to understand the history a bit more. I need to understand, my relationship to Israel, which I didn't have one. So I was really curious to understand, what do I feel about these things, and what can I learn about these things, and what does it mean to be American Jew in this moment. Politically, I consider myself progressive, so I wanted to know, like, was there a progressive space for Jews who can critically think about this moment? So that's where I came to Avodah. We had a session a couple months ago that was like the session on Israel and Palestine. And I think a lot of us came into that feeling pretty nervous, because I feel like up to that point, we were all becoming really good friends and we all kind of agreed on everything. And I was like, this is going to be the session where we might just start to see our real differences and some like pretty heavy things. And I don't feel this big connection to Israel, but for a lot of the people in the fellowship, they do. They have a lot of family there, or they've spent a lot of time there, or they were raised in a way to see Israel in a certain way. So I think for some of the people in the group, it was a really hard topic to work through. So I was really grateful to have that experience, just to kind of sit there and like observe and take everything in and hear everybody's opinions. A big reason why I wanted to do this program was actually like I really want to delve into the discomfort, because I think like it feels to me that nuance is gone these days. I think in the age of social media and like quick, fast reactions to everything happening all at once, we've just completely lost nuance. Everything is very binary. And I think like that's a huge problem in our world. So my hope was to like, I want to delve and stay and like work through the nuance and the like murkiness of the gray area, because I just think that's what life is. That's where we all live. We all live in the gray area. So I was looking for a place where we could like sit in that discomfort and like really get into things. This is honestly like probably one of the first times I've really gotten to know people who were raised Orthodox or who were raised much more conservatively. That's been really interesting to meet people who are raised so different from me, and yet we still are connected via this culture and this shared history, and to see like, oh, it's interesting that we still do kind of view the world similarly, or have very similar political views, or or we could just get along, like we can just hang out and have fun. It doesn't feel like there's this huge wedge between us, or like it doesn't feel like, oh wow, we really come from such different places that I don't know if we can breach this to just become social friends. But to realize that, yeah, we can. But I do think it's like, it's just a good practice ground maybe of like, yeah, we don't like 100% agree on everything. So we're still having kind of like some back and forth and stuff like that, where it's interesting to hear like where everyone's coming from and what people have to say about certain things happening in the world. Because I think like we're all then going off into our own spaces, our work, our relationships, or whatever, where people are going to disagree with us. And a lot of times it feels like as Jews, I feel like we're kind of the ambassadors to people who aren't Jewish, of like, this is how the Jewish community feels about things. But really, it's just how I feel about things. But I now have more insight into how other Jews feel about these things too. So that's been really helpful. I really think like we all need to be leaning very heavily into discomfort right now, and to be having hard conversations, and to be finding the nuance, and to be in that gray area, because this stuff is not binary, and it becomes really dangerous when people force it to be binary. I've been in a lot of like spaces or workshops or rooms where it's been a bunch of people who I guess would say like are more politically left. And I've found there's a lot of like common problems that I've seen in a lot of these spaces, which is like it's very easy to sort of get lost in the weeds. We get lost in the logistics of the planning, and it's easy to get lost in the weeds of like trying to feel like, we all have to agree on something in order to move forward, as opposed to like, okay, maybe we have slightly different views, slightly different opinions, but we got to move forward, where this is bigger than our own, slightly different opinions. And I guess like as I've like understood politics a little bit more, especially in the US, this idea of coalition building, I think like just see like coalitions fail a lot of times because they don't agree on some basic commonalities, and they feel more militantly tied to their opinions or their ideas of the world, and therefore the coalition falls apart. And I just think like when we've seen successful coalitions throughout the US history, it's usually when a bunch of people with a bunch of different ideas come together and can agree on some commonality. So I find that like, especially, post October 7th, when you're in a room with a bunch of Jewish people who come from different backgrounds, and some people have a lot of family in Israel, or some people grew up more conservatively and have a very specific view of the role of Israel in the world as it relates to like the safety of Jews. We naturally have disagreements or different opinions. And I think like if we've created an environment where we can voice those opinions and question each other in a critical way that is helpful and not judgmental, then we can still leave those spaces being like, okay, I don't, totally agree with this person on that, but like, I don't hate them. I don't think they're lesser than. I just think like, yeah, like I understand the context of where they're coming from or where their family is versus how I see it. So I guess I've like really gotten to appreciate this idea of coalition building. And I think in social justice spaces, it's so important because you're just not going to agree with everybody, but you still have to move forward. So we had another session a few weeks ago that was about politics, local politics. And Ruth Messenger was there, who she ran for New York City mayor and has just been like a huge force in New York City politics forever. And she spoke and she just gave like basically like a great history of like why New York City politics are the way that they are. Kind of what put into context for me was how much work the Jewish diaspora in New York City, and I guess like broadly in the US, has done to organize. And I think like, the reason there are like certain organizations that exist today is because of organizing. And it's because of like, the Jews who were coming to America, who were like coming to a new place and were starting fresh and just like did the hard work of like getting involved and organizing and building organizations that like have really stood the test of time to become these like very influential places. So it's interesting to see today there are much more spaces that are more left-leaning or more social justice oriented, maybe not political, but are just really interested in taking that legacy of organizing and like heads down hard work of like building power within communities to build influence and to push forward values that align with how I want to see the world and the kind of world that I want to live in. And so Ruth Messenger just kind of, in a way, kind of bringing that to my mind of like, wow, this community has done so much work. Some of it, some of it I don't agree with, some of it I do agree with, but like we started from nothing and like built all of these like amazing organizations. And that was like because of hard work and because of, people just made it happen through their will and through their force. And it's a cool legacy. Like, I think this fellowship for me was a way to start that process of bringing that unconscious stuff into my consciousness of like, how do I now enter social justice spaces from a place of my Jewish identity or knowing certain, interesting historical context to like how Jews have been involved in social justice movements in the past, and how I'm kind of picking up that legacy or living that legacy and how I can modernize it to this time or how I can adapt to whatever is happening in the world, from the point of view of someone who's like a little bit more in touch with like the culture and the history of Jewish social justice work. At the end of our fellowship, we have a project that we work on that is sort of a culmination of what we've learned and what we're interested in exploring. And right now I'm still figuring out what I want mine to be, but it's looking like something about a Shabbat dinner, where people who are at the dinner explore our economic power in a capitalist society and how we as individuals and consumers and capitalists, how we can take some power back from these companies that feel too large and too scary and too unaligned with our values. So I'm hoping to create a space where people feel we can collectively together start to take a little bit of that power back into our hands. Maybe that's a one-off, or maybe it's something that I can continue. I'm not really sure, but at least I feel like I have some tools and some built-in network now to explore those things more. For people who are Jewish, maybe you were raised Jewish or just like went to synagogue on the high holidays, maybe you had a bar bat mitzvah and just kind of called it a day. I think like if you are at all interested in exploring this period of time that is really fraught and really scary and really weird and messy, if you feel like this is a good time to explore how you fit in as a Jewish person or someone interested in Judaism, I think this is a great fellowship to delve into some of those things. It's a start, it's not the ending, but I think it's a really good place just to start to build some more understanding of the larger, longer, very long context going back to ancient days of like what role Jews played throughout the world, including like where some of these anti-Semitic tropes come from. I learned a lot about that. I didn't know that stuff. So I felt like you learn these little bits of, knowledge and historical things that maybe we was just kind of like, you just kind of knew that's how a lot of the world viewed Jews, but you didn't really know where that came from. So I'm just finding this to be a great launching point for understanding my Jewishness in the world and to understand how I can then move forward in this crazy moment of time as a Jewish person who is interested in building a better world. So I think in that sense, this fellowship is a great place to start that journey.